History is written by gaslight and polished by electricity, but the shadows in between often hide the darkest truths. In 1885, Austin, Texas, was a city racing toward the future. This wasn't the dusty, lawless frontier of popular imagination. This was the city of the Violet Crown, a nickname earned from the ethereal glow that settled over the western hills at sunset. It was a city of progress, a post-Reconstruction boomtown swelling with ambition and pride. The brand new state capitol building, a monument of Texas granite, was under construction. The University of Texas had just opened its doors, a beacon of learning for a new generation. And most symbolically of all, the city was installing a revolutionary new technology: electric moon towers, 31 colossal iron structures designed to bathe the streets in light, to banish the night, and to prove that Austin was the most modern city in the South. But this vision of progress, like the Gilded Age itself, was built upon a fractured and deeply segregated foundation. For every grand avenue and stately home, there was a network of unlit alleys, muddy streets, and simple wooden dwellings. This was the other Austin, the one that served. It was the world of the servant class, a community comprised almost entirely of black men and women, many just one generation removed from slavery. They lived in small cabins, often tucked away in the backyards of the white families they worked for. This proximity, this forced intimacy between two worlds, would soon become a landscape of unimaginable terror. The nightmare began just 2 nights before the new year, on December 30th, 1884. The victim was Molly Smith, a 25-year-old cook. She was attacked in the dead of night, not on a dark street, but in her own cabin, a place of supposed sanctuary. Her partner, Walter Spencer, was severely wounded in the assault. Molly was dragged from her bed out into the yard where she was brutally murdered with an axe. The initial reaction from the city's authorities and its press was tragically predictable. It was seen as a Negro crime, a domestic dispute spiraled into fatal violence. The Austin Daily Statesman reported the murder with a kind of detached, racialized lens, common for the era. Walter Spencer, the wounded survivor, was immediately the prime suspect. For the white citizenry of Austin, the event was a lurid but distant tragedy. It was not their problem. This, they assumed, was violence contained to a world they did not and chose not to understand. But the killer was not finished. On the night of March 19, 1885, another servant, Eliza Shelley, was attacked in her cabin and dragged outside. She was found with her head nearly cleaved in two. Less than 2 months later, in May, Irene Cross, a washerwoman, was found murdered in a similar fashion. A pattern was emerging, a horrifying signature that the police, blinded by their own prejudices, were slow to recognize. The victims were all black women. They all worked as servants. They were all attacked in their own homes, in their own beds. They were all killed with an axe, a common domestic tool now turned into an instrument of unspeakable butchery. The attacks were not robberies. They were savage, marked by extreme violence, sexual violation, and post-mortem mutilation. This was not a crime of passion. This was the work of a fiend, a term that began to be whispered in the terrified black communities. While the white-owned papers were still dismissing the killings as isolated incidents, the city's black population knew better. They knew a singular, terrifying intelligence was stalking their streets. They were the first to feel the chill of a new kind of fear, a fear that had no name. The authorities, meanwhile, fumbled. They rounded up the usual suspects, arresting dozens of black men in sweeps, hoping a confession would fall into their laps. But the killer remained invisible. He moved through the city's shadows with impunity, a ghost in the alleys, a phantom who knew the city's intimate geography better than those hunting him. By the late spring of 1885, the bloody tally was rising. The killer was getting bolder, more confident. He was learning, refining his terrible craft with each life he took. The city of Austin, so proud of its new university and its towering moon towers that were not even yet lit, was completely unaware that it was harboring America's first serial killer. The press and police were still treating these murders as a class of crime, not the work of one man. But the Annihilator was about to cross a line, a brutal, bloody line that would finally shatter the city's illusion of safety. He was about to make the white, wealthy, and powerful citizens of Austin understand the terror he had already unleashed. The servant Girl Annihilator, as he would soon be known, was just getting started.
For the first half of 1885, Austin was a city of two minds. In the daylight, it was the vibrant, progressive city of the Violet Crown. But in the dark, for its black citizens, it was a hunting ground. The white establishment, insulated by prejudice and privilege, had successfully compartmentalized the terror. The brutal axe murders of Molly Smith, Eliza Shelley, and Irene Cross were seen not as a civic crisis, but as a tragic yet distant symptom of life in the servant quarters. The police continued their strategy of sweeping arrests within the black community, convinced the killer was among them, likely driven by a simple, sordid motive of jealousy or rage. The idea of a fiend, a term used by the victim's neighbors, had not yet breached the walls of the white parlors. That illusion of safety, that fatal denial, was shattered on the night of August 6, 1885. The killer crossed the line. The victim was Susan Hancock, a white woman. She was not a servant. She lived in a respectable home, not a backyard cabin. She was attacked in her own yard, her head split open by the now familiar signature, an axe. The shock that jolted Austin was immediate and profound. This was not a Negro crime. This was an assault on the city itself, an attack on the social and racial order that defined their world. The Austin Daily Statesman, which had previously relegated the murders of black women to brief, detached columns, now erupted in sensational front-page horror. The city's white population awoke to a truth the black community had known for months. There was a monster loose in their city. The killer's audacity was stunning. He had moved from the marginalized shadows into the very heart of white Austin. The police, completely wrong-footed, were now under a new, unbearable pressure. Their racist assumptions had proven useless. This killer was not bound by the city's rigid social geography. He defied it. And just as the city was grappling with the implications of Susan Hancock's murder, the Annihilator struck again, this time with a brutality that added a new, disturbing layer to his crimes. On the night of September 28th, Eula Phillips, another white woman, was attacked. She was a young, married woman, killed in her own home. Her husband, James Phillips, was found wounded nearby, claiming he had fought the attacker. But the crime scene was one of total carnage. Eula had been murdered in her bed, the axe blows so violent they had nearly decapitated her. The killer had then dragged her body outside. This time, the sexual and sadistic nature of the crimes was undeniable and explicitly reported. The press, now fully engaged in the hysteria, began to coin their own names for the unknown predator. He was the Midnight Assassin. He was the Axeman. And, most tellingly, he was the Servant Girl Annihilator, a name that stuck even as his victim profile expanded. The name itself is a chilling artifact, a testament to how the killer was initially defined and dismissed by the race and class of his first victims. The police, desperate for an arrest, did what they had always done. They looked for the simplest answer. They arrested James Phillips, Eula's husband. The case against him was flimsy, built on the assumption that this must be a domestic dispute, a crime of passion. The alternative, that a motiveless stranger had entered a home, murdered a wife, and overpowered her husband, was too terrifying, too modern, too chaotic for the 19th century mind to accept. The investigation was a catalog of error and bias. Evidence was trampled on. Theories were driven by prejudice. The police force was fundamentally unequipped to hunt the predator of this new, abnormal type. They were looking for a known face, a logical motive. The killer had neither. While James Phillips sat in a jail cell, the press began to do the work the police would not. Editors and journalists, looking back at the year's crimes, started to connect the dots. They lined up the murders of Hancock and Phillips with the earlier forgotten murders of Molly Smith, Eliza Shelley, and Irene Cross. They recognized the shared signatures, the axe, the attack in the home, the dragging of the body, the extreme violence. The terrible realization dawned on the city as a whole. This was not a string of unrelated tragedies. This was a reign of terror, orchestrated by a single, bloodthirsty intelligence. The panic that had simmered in the black community now boiled over and consumed all of Austin. No one was safe. The class and racial barriers that had defined the city now seemed like flimsy gates, easily kicked open by a madman with an axe. The servant girl Annihilator had made himself known. He had forced the entire city to see him, to fear him. The fall of 1885 approached, and Austin, the proud city of the Violet Crown, was now a city besieged from within, haunted by a killer who owned the night.
The fall of 1885 bled into winter, and Austin was no longer a city. It was a prison of shared fear. The servant girl Annihilator had graduated from a shadowy fiend to a household name, a boogeyman invoked in whispers in every parlor, saloon, and kitchen. The murders of Susan Hancock and Eula Phillips had shattered the city's racial and social barriers, proving that wealth, whiteness, and respectability offered no protection. The killer owned the dark, and now the dark was everywhere. The city's very rhythm changed. As dusk approached, the bustling commerce of Congress Avenue evaporated. Streets emptied. Doors were not just locked, they were barred, barricaded with furniture. The sale of firearms and new heavy-duty locks skyrocketed. A local hardware store, which had previously advertised garden tools, now ran daily ads for the Champion 6-shot revolver and patent deadbolts. The silence of the night was replaced by a new, terrifying soundscape, the nervous bark of a dog, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of wind, and, most chillingly, the heavy, organized tread of armed men. The police, having arrested Eula Phillips's husband, James, were seen as incompetent at best and dangerously misguided at worst. With no new leads and no new arrests that stuck, the men of Austin took the law into their own hands. Vigilante committees were formed. These were not lynch mobs, not yet, but citizen patrols of prominent businessmen, clerks, and laborers who armed themselves with shotguns and pistols and marched through the unlit streets. But this citizen-led defense only added a new volatile layer of terror. The city was now stalked by two nightmares: the unseen killer and dozens of trigger-happy paranoid amateurs roaming the alleys, ready to shoot at any shadow that moved. And the shadows were deeper than ever, thanks to the city's great failed promise, the moon towers. By late fall, all 31 of the colossal iron towers were finally lit, casting a harsh electric glare over the center of the city. They had been built to banish the night, to make Austin a beacon of 24-hour progress. Instead, they became instruments of psychological torture. The towers were too far apart, the light too uneven. They didn't illuminate the city, they fractured it. They cast immense, miles-long shadows that seemed to move and writhe. They turned familiar backyards into alien landscapes of stark light and impenetrable black. The killer was not deterred by the light. He seemed to use it, to hunt in the deep artificial darkness created by the city's own technology. The moon towers, symbols of Austin's Gilded Age ambition, were now seen as 31 monstrous iron skeletons watching over a city they had failed to protect. With the police stalled and the vigilantes jumpy, the public's fear curdled into mass hysteria. Everyone had a theory, and every theory revealed the deep-seated prejudices of the age.
Letters flooded the offices of the Austin Daily Statesman. Some claimed it was a madman, an escapee from the state asylum. Others, tapping into the era's rampant xenophobia, pointed to the city's Malay or Chinese cooks, seen as foreign and sinister men who had access to the very homes and kitchens where the axes were kept. One popular theory, whispered in saloons, was that of a gorilla man, a half-human beast with supernatural strength who could leap fences and tear women from their beds. The police, desperate to show any progress, responded not with investigation, but with brute force. They escalated their sweeps, arresting hundreds of black men, often on the flimsiest of pretexts. Any black man found on the street after dark without a good reason was a suspect. The jail was filled to bursting, a holding pen for the innocent. This dragnet accomplished nothing other than to terrorize the black community twice over, first by the killer and then by the police. The authorities even brought in so-called man-hunting bloodhounds from a nearby town. The dogs were taken to the scene of Eula Phillips's murder, but in a moment of grim comedy, they simply sniffed the ground, ran in confused circles, and then sat down, utterly baffling their handlers. The press called it a fiasco. The city was a powder keg of paranoia, incompetence, and racial tension, and the Annihilator was about to strike the match. The night was Christmas Eve, 1885. On a night that represented peace, family, and sanctuary, the killer unleashed his masterpiece of terror. He struck 2 homes in a single bloody rampage. He murdered Sue East, a young mother, in her own backyard. Her husband, Moses East, was critically wounded, his head split open as he tried to defend his wife. That same night, in a different part of the city, the killer entered the home of the Hall family, attacking 2 young sisters. The city awoke on Christmas morning, not to carols, but to screaming headlines of a Christmas Eve massacre. This was the climax, the final, unbearable act of a year-long reign of terror. The city was not just under siege, it had been breached, its spirit broken. The Annihilator had proven on the holiest night of the year that no lock, no patrol, and no tower of light could ever stop him.
The Christmas Eve massacre of 1885 was the Annihilator's crescendo, a final, brutal statement of his power. And then, as suddenly as he had arrived, he was gone. The new year, 1886, dawned on a city that was not relieved, but suspended in a state of traumatized shock. The vigilante patrols continued. The doors remained bolted. The moon towers still cast their funereal light. But the axe, which had fallen with such horrifying regularity, now lay still. Weeks turned into a month turned into 2. There were no new attacks, no bodies in the yard, no midnight screams. The silence itself was a new kind of mystery, a new kind of terror. Had the killer been scared off by the citizen patrols? Had he been quietly arrested and jailed for some other lesser crime? Had he succumbed to madness or illness or his own violent impulses? Or had he simply moved on? For the citizens of Austin, the lack of an answer was its own form of torture. The city had been brutalized by a phantom, and now that phantom had simply vanished, leaving a legacy of 8 murdered women and a community forever scarred. For nearly a century, that was where the story ended, in a void, an unsolved, terrifying chapter of American history that was quickly and perhaps purposefully papered over. But the case of the servant girl Annihilator was too strange, too brutal to remain buried. In the late 20th century, researchers and authors poring over the old case files began to notice an eerie echo, a chilling parallel to a case that was about to explode 3 years later and an ocean away. In 1888, the Whitechapel district of London, a place of fog, gaslight, and poverty, was gripped by a similar, if not more sensational, reign of terror.
A killer known as Jack the Ripper was murdering and gruesomely mutilating female prostitutes. The similarities were undeniable. The victims were women. The violence was extreme and sexually sadistic. The killer was a phantom who terrorized an entire city, and the police were left baffled and humiliated. The press on both sides of the Atlantic, though years apart, used the same language of fiends, madmen, and monsters. This gave birth to one of the most sensational and controversial theories in all of true crime. What if the Austin killer and Jack the Ripper were the same man? The American Connection, as it came to be known, was championed in books and articles, most notably by author Phillips. The theory centered on a tantalizing, if circumstantial, thread. One of the prominent suspects in Austin, mentioned in the frantic letters to the press, was a Malay cook. Cooks, especially on steamships, were a transient class, and it was a Malay cook who was also a person of interest in the London case. The theory posited that this anonymous cook, a seaman on a cotton steamer, had worked in Austin in 1885, committed his atrocities, and then traveled to London, where his bloodlust reignited in 1888. The MO was different: an axe in Austin, a knife in London. But proponents argued this was a refinement of his craft. The idea was electric. It linked America's first serial killer to the world's most famous one. It created a narrative of a singular globe-trotting monster. But for all its sensational appeal, the theory rests on almost no physical evidence. It is a compelling what if, a dark legend born from the similarities between two terrifying and unsolved historical nightmares. While the London theory captured the public's imagination, a far more chilling and far more plausible suspect has emerged from the Austin files themselves. This theory does not require a transatlantic journey. It requires only looking at the man who was right there, a man whose own violent end coincides perfectly with the end of the Annihilator's reign. His name was Nathan Elgin. He was a 19-year-old black man who worked as a cook in an Austin saloon. He had access to kitchens and thus to axes. Elgin was known in his community for two things: his explosive, violent temper and his distinct physical deformity. He had a club foot. This detail, a malformed foot that would leave a unique print, is critical. In the aftermath of the final Christmas Eve murders, investigators at the scene where Sue East was killed noted something specific. The victim had been attacked and then dragged. In the mud and dirt of the yard, they found a trail of bloody footprints. The prints, they noted, were not from two normal feet, but from one normal foot and one that was strangely malformed. The trail was left by a club-footed man. Nathan Elgin, a local cook with a known history of violence against women, fit the description. Why was he not immediately arrested? Perhaps the police, in their chaotic dragnet, simply lost this piece of evidence among the hundreds of other leads. Or perhaps his death made an investigation unnecessary. In February of 1886, just 2 months after the final murder, Nathan Elgin was cornered by police in the saloon where he worked. He was reportedly in a rage, threatening a woman with a knife. As the police attempted to arrest him, Elgin lunged. An officer fired his pistol, and Nathan Elgin fell dead to the floor. With his death, the murders stopped permanently. The timeline is a perfect, chilling match. The physical evidence of the footprint points directly to him. His job gave him the means, and his known rage gave him the motive. The truth, it seems, is not a grand international conspiracy, but a local, and therefore more intimate horror. The monster was not a foreign other, but a disturbed young man from their own community. His rage hidden in plain sight, his identity masked by the very chaos of the citywide panic he had created. The case of the servant girl Annihilator was solved, it seems, not by detectives, but by a bullet fired in a dirty saloon. The death of Nathan Elgin in a smoky Austin saloon in February 1886 was not a grand finale. There was no trial of the century, no screaming headline declaring, "The Annihilator is dead." He was killed in the act of committing another violent crime, his death seen as a justifiable, if routine, shooting. And with that single bullet, the year of terror simply ended. The city of Austin, which had been holding its collective breath, slowly, cautiously began to exhale. The vigilante patrols grew less frequent, then stopped. The barricades of furniture were moved away from the doors. The champion six-shot revolver ads were gradually replaced by advertisements for spring seeds and dry goods. The city did not celebrate because the case was never officially closed. It just stopped. And in this abrupt, anticlimactic silence, the true, final mystery of the servant girl annihilator begins. Not who done it, but why was it forgotten? How does a case of this magnitude, a year-long reign of terror by what was almost certainly America's first serial killer, vanish from the public consciousness, overshadowed by a London killer who had not yet even struck? The answer, like the crimes themselves, is found in the deep, unexamined foundations of the city. The primary reason for this historical amnesia is the one the case was named for. The killer was dubbed the Servant Girl Annihilator, a title that, even as his victim list grew, forever tethered the crimes to their origins, the murder of poor black women. The first victims, Molly Smith, Eliza Shelley, Irene Cross, were seen by the white establishment as disposable, their murders a problem for their community, not the city's. By the time the killer crossed racial lines, the narrative was already set. This was not a prestige crime. It was not the murder of aristocrats. It was a brutal, low crime. And history, especially in the 19th century, had little time for the stories of the marginalized. The case was defined and then dismissed by the race and class of its first victims. The second reason is the nature of its solution. The most plausible suspect, Nathan Elgin, was also black. His death was not a victory for justice, but a cry at taking out the trash. There was no public trial to create a lasting record. There was no confession to be printed and reprinted. There was no celebrity madman, no charismatic monster like H.H. Holmes, whose murder castle would become a national sensation. The Annihilator's story ended with a squalid, convenient death that allowed the city to sweep the entire ugly affair under the rug. The monster was dead, so there was no need to speak of him or his victims ever again. Finally, the Great Forgetting was an act of civic will. Austin, in the late 1880s, was a city of boundless ambition. It was completing its magnificent granite state capitol building, which would be the largest in the nation. It was solidifying the University of Texas as a premier institution. It was the city of the Violet Crown, a beacon of progress and civility. A brutal, unsolved, and racially charged serial killer case did not fit this new polished brand. It was a story of Gilded Age progress, not Gothic horror. The city, its boosters, and its historians simply chose to look forward, to build their shining new capital over the unquiet graves of the Annihilator's victims. The story was bad for business, and so it ceased to be a story at all. Today, the most tangible legacy of that year of terror still stands, silhouetted against the Texas sky. The moon towers, the 155-foot iron structures built to banish the dark, are still there. They are now beloved, quirky city landmarks, featured on t-shirts and posters, their original terrifying purpose almost completely unknown to the citizens who walk beneath them. They are artifacts of a forgotten fear, iron skeletons in Austin's closet. But the true legacy is the silence. The case of the Servant Girl Annihilator is more than just a cold case. It is a dark history. It's a story that forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History is not a perfect record. It is a narrative shaped by those with the power to tell it. The official story chose to remember the ambition of the 1880s, not the terror. It chose to remember the city of the Violet Crown, not the city of the axe. The real mystery, then, is not what happened in 1885, but what happened in all the years after. The clues to the killer, like the footprint left by Nathan Elgin, were there all along, but so were the clues to the forgetting, the segregated headlines, the convenient shooting, the ambitious architecture. The past is never truly dead. It just waits, buried in the archives, for someone to finally turn the page and speak the names of those who were silenced. Not just the name of the Annihilator, but the names of Molly Smith, Eliza Shelley, Irene Cross, Susan Hancock, Eula Phillips, Sue East, and the others. Their story was never a whodunit, it was a whydunit, a question we are only now, over a century later, finally willing to ask.
Join the discussion in the comments below. If you want to join the next investigation, subscribe to StorySketch AI and hit the notification bell so you are here when we unseal it.